Right now, this outside campfire is heating the inside of my snowmobile camper. As a matter of fact, although it is below freezing outside, the fire has already heated the inside of my camper to a toasty 23 degrees Celsius, or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And so I'll show you here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's Celsius. And I did it using this ammo box and this copper coil. Stay tuned. Last winter, I built this snowmobile camper with my dad. Since it's too small for a wood stove, I've been experimenting with different ways to heat it during the night. On one trip, I heated rocks over the campfire, and on another, I heated water in a container, both of which I set inside the camper to help warm it while I slept. This worked for several hours, but eventually the heat dissipated. The good news is that since the camper is insulated, my body heat did a pretty good job at keeping the inside temperature above freezing. But my goal is to make the camper warm and comfortable over a sustained period of time, not just survivable. The following summer, I developed something that I call the ammo box heater. I ran water from the ammo box through a copper coil in the fire, which heated the water and circulated it back to the tank. My intention is to use the ammo box as a large thermal battery inside the camper, something that is able to store a lot of heat and radiate it slowly over the course of the night. Today, I will be improving upon my initial design and incorporating it into the snowmobile camper so that I can give it a proper test. I started by installing 3 valves in the ammo box. One for the cold water outlet, another for the hot water inlet, and one at the top to act as a vent to prevent any pressure buildup in the system. I then drilled a hole in the floor, which is where the cold water hose will run outside the camper. Now when I'm traveling with the camper, I can close the hole up. And when it comes time to stop and set up for the night, I can simply unscrew the cap and open it back up again. Next, I had to shape the copper coil. To shield the copper from the intense heat of the fire, I decided to coil it inside the lobster pot. While I work away at this, I'd like to take a moment to thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's episode. If you'd like to increase your skill set and expand your horizons this coming year, I suggest checking out Skillshare. They offer thousands of courses that cover a wide range of topics, like photography, entrepreneurship, writing, animation, and illustration, to name only a few. I'm currently taking a class with Dan Liu, titled Creating a Modern Cinematic Documentary with Soul. With so much to explore, real projects to create, and the support of fellow creatives, Skillshare empowers you to accomplish your goals. Skillshare is also incredibly affordable, especially when compared to pricey in-person classes and workshops. Skillshare is giving away 2 free months of premium membership to help you explore your creativity if you click the link in the description box. And after that, it's only around $10 a month. It took some careful work to get the copper coiled inside the pot without kinking it, but I managed to do it. Once hooked up, the water will enter at the bottom, spiral up through the 6 coils, and exit at the top. I then fill the lobster pot with sand. This will further protect the coil from overheating in the fire. And once the fire eventually dies down, the sand will also retain its heat for a time, helping to keep the coil hot for an hour or 2 longer. I then installed a one-way valve on the cold water line heading into the coil. Although this is a small component, it's an important one. Here's why. As the cold water enters the coil and becomes heated, it will naturally expand. This expansion will cause the water to surge in both directions. This is known as water hammer, which can clearly be heard in my initial design. Not only was the water hammer loud, but it also disrupted the circulation of the system, which is why I installed a swinging one-way valve in this new setup. The water can now only expand in one direction, which I have set toward the ammo box's hot water intake. So without the use of an actual pump, the heated water in the coil is able to pump itself back into the hot water tank. This is a proven design because coffee makers work on the same basic principle. Okay, so we're half hooked up here, meaning that I have the water line from the hot water tank heading out of the camper, through the hoses, into the copper coil. And if you see the return line here, it's not hooked up yet. But that's because I want to see if the water flows freely through everything on its own. So I have the water turned on inside, and I'm just going to go here to this little valve and open it up. And as you can see, we have pretty good flow on its own, which is good because I was wondering if it would be able to get through all the hoses, plus this one-way valve. But it seems to be doing a good job on its own already. And so once we get it all hooked up and once we get heat on the coil, then it'll flow that much better. Okay, so we're just about ready to go. Everything's all hooked up, and as you can see on my hot water tank here, I have 3 valves. There's one on the top, which is just for the vent, which goes outside the vent I have in the top here. And so this vent valve just prevents any pressure buildup from happening. I don't want the system to work under pressure because that's very dangerous. And so I'm just leaving this vent open, and it'll just keep, again, pressure from building up. Over here we look at these 2 valves on the side. This is my outgoing valve. which goes to the copper coil out at the campfire. And then it gets heated up at the campfire and is brought back into the return valve here. And so cold water out, hot water in, and as it circulates, the system will begin to equalize, but that's how it works. Okay, so it's been about 25 minutes now, and it's taken a lot of heat to heat up the frozen sand that was in this pot here, but now that the sand is hot, the water is now starting to run really hot over here, and I'm just gonna, that's almost too hot to touch, and then I'm starting to feel the hose here warming up, so it's actually making its way up and into the ammo box. So it should start warming up. It will be a slow process, I think, but once the whole system gets warm, then it'll be warm for a long time. I've had the fire going for exactly an hour and a half now, and the lobster pot is starting to get nice and hot, which is giving some good circulation to the whole system. So right now it's -1 degree Celsius outside, and inside the camper it's 13 degrees Celsius and climbing. I suspect that in another hour or so the camper will be quite warm on the inside, and I'll likely have to move the lobster pot from the fire just so that it doesn't get too hot on the inside. But right now I'm really happy with the circulation. Once this fire dies down, since there's so much thermal mass in the system, between the 20 pounds of sand in the lobster pot and the 30 to 40 liters of water in the ammo box, I guess it'd be about 30 liters of water in the ammo box. There's a lot of thermal mass to hold and store all this heat. So even after the fire has gone out, there should be a lot of residual heat left in the system that will take quite a while to dissipate. So I think it'll stay warm well into the night. And really what I could do is just let the lobster pot stay on the fire as it burns down to coals, and it would just give a nice slow and even circulation throughout the night. And so I wouldn't have to worry about the lines freezing, and there would still be a certain amount of heat being fed into the camper. So far the system's working really well, and I'm really pleased with it. Despite its clunkiness and its intricacies, I can see how this would be really useful in certain applications. So I've left the fire to burn down now, and I've crawled inside where it's nice and warm, and I've had the coil on the fire for 2 hours now. The thermostat is telling me that inside it's 20 degrees Celsius, and on the outside it's 0 degrees Celsius. And let me see here, I'll see if I can do the conversion for my American friends. So that's 32 degrees outside and 68 degrees Fahrenheit inside. This ammo box heater has worked amazingly well. It's exceeded my expectations. I wasn't sure how it was going to perform today, but I couldn't be happier with how it's doing. The great thing is that there are no leaks. Of course, you can't have any leaks in here. So that's working well. If I put my hand on the tank, it's too hot to touch. It's too hot to touch all the way until the bottom 3 inches. It still feels a little lukewarm. So all the hot water is coming into the top, and the cooler water is draining out the bottom. So everything's working well and it's circulating well. When I made this design in the beginning, I just threw the coil right on the fire, and that was nice because it gave immediate results. Right away there was hot water pumping into the tank, but it was kind of like a runaway freight train. It just got way too hot, way too fast, and of course that damages the coil when it's in direct flame like that, so that wasn't good. Another downside of having the copper coil right on the fire was that it created a lot of water hammering. So there was a lot of thumping and banging. It was really loud and scary sounding. And so what's nice now is that there's just kind of like a gentle gurgling sound, which might annoy some people as they sleep, but I know for myself that will be kind of a comforting sound that'll help me sleep quite well. This is a great system. The downside of it is that you can't really control it other than to take the lobster pot or to take the coil out of the fire. There's no real thermostat, at least the way that I have it set up right now. But the way that it's circulating, the way that it's just nice and gradual, it doesn't look like I have to worry about it too much. Actually, the temperature is still rising in here. It's 21 degrees Celsius inside right now. Actually, it's a little too warm for my liking. As a matter of fact, I might actually open the door in a couple minutes here just to cool the place down a bit because I'm a little too warm. But that's good because once winter hits, once it gets really cold, I would like to camp with this in the winter. Well, it's winter right now, but I mean when the real snow comes, when the real cold comes, I would like to try this out. And so it's nice that it's overperforming right now. It's making the place a little bit too hot, because in colder weather, then it would be able to sustain this place a little bit longer. And the heat is being held inside also because I've insulated this entire snowmobile camper. There are 2 inches of insulation all around me, and there are 2.5 inches of insulation above me. So this place is well insulated. I do have some vents. I do have a vent here, and I have a vent in the other end. Also, I have a vent at the bottom where where the cold water is coming out of the camper. As a matter of fact, I actually should probably block that vent up a little bit because there's some cold air coming in right now. But that's not a bad thing at this point because it's cooling the place down a little bit for me. Is this practical? A lot of people have asked me that. Is this really a practical design? And I don't really have an answer for you. In some ways, in many ways, it's not all that practical. There are a lot of parts to it. It's clunky, it's hard to move around. During the daytime, you have to bleed the lines of all water so that it doesn't freeze and crack the copper or crack the hoses. So it does take some maintenance. It does take some babysitting. Is it practical? Probably not in most circumstances. But what I like about this setup is that it can be used over a longer period of time. Say if I'm in an off-grid location and I'm far away from civilization, say if I'm setting a trap line somewhere, you can haul this snowmobile camper in, so you don't have to build yourself a cabin. You just come in with your snowmobile and your camper's right there. So this is like a little miniature cabin, and it can set up anywhere. And then if you pull out this ammo box heater and get it going, then you're really set for a while. And I can keep doing that day in, day out over an extended period of time. Whereas every other heating method, other than having a wood stove in here, which is what I don't want to do, there's no real practical way to heat the inside of this over a long period of time. So I would say this design is more sustainable, which is what I'm going for. I would like a design that I can fix on my own, that I can use for a longer period of time. I don't have to rely on batteries or solar panels or generators or anything like that. This is all just basic laws of physics, I guess you can say. As long as you have water, and there's plenty of snow around, so there's always water. As long as you have firewood to make the fire, and we're surrounded in firewood, we're fine. There could be a point of failure. There likely after a while will be a point of failure in the seals. They're experiencing a lot of heat. I'm trying to operate this ammo box within their heating parameters. I think I would like to take some spare seals with me, just in case if the seal fails, I can replace the seal. But otherwise, once this is set up, it runs really well. It just takes a bit of caretaking. Currently, the temperature is continuing to drop outside. Right now, it says it's -1 degree Celsius, and inside it's 22 degrees Celsius. So it's getting really toasty in here as I talk. Now, I've mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. This is what I call an open system. So this system is not under any pressure whatsoever. I just don't trust a system that's under pressure. I know that I could buy like a low pressure relief valve, you know, this would heat better under pressure, but I just don't want to deal with that. I just don't like the idea of this being pressurized and being in the small space that we are in right now. So what I've done is I've left the system open. So that's what this top valve is for. I have it open right now, and so this green hose that's going out, that's just my vent hose. It just prevents any pressure from being built up in the system, and so I don't have to worry about it blowing out on me. So the worst case scenario really for me is that one of these seals fail eventually, and it would begin to leak slowly. And so that's not a big deal, I could replace it. But I just didn't want to deal with having any sort of pressure in the system, which is why I'm venting it outside. And that's an important thing as well, that I'm not just venting it into the camper, because then there would be a lot of condensation. Something else to note about these ammo box containers, when I made my last video about the copper coil heater, my ammo box heater, some people were saying, oh, that's really great, you can heat, but you can also have hot water for drinks and for cooking and all that stuff. But this ammo box is by no means food grade at all. This is not food grade. And so I would not trust the water coming out of this thing to drink it or to cook my food in it. It just wouldn't be safe. It's not food grade. And I don't know what kind of coating the military used to treat these ammo boxes, but I assure you it's not for human consumption. So that's something to consider if you're wanting to build something similar. Really need to do the research yourself and figure out what's the best, what's the safest, what's the most efficient. This is a larger ammo box. It holds probably about 30 liters of water. I'm not sure what that converts to in gallons, but anyway, it holds quite a bit of water, which is good. Some people suggested that instead of using like this hot water tank setup, that I use a radiator, which would more efficiently radiate heat into the camper. And that is a good idea, except again, I wouldn't want it under pressure. I wouldn't want that at all. But the reason why I went with a water tank style as opposed to a radiator is because I want this to be, to act like a big thermal battery. A radiator is designed to lose its heat quickly, but this is designed to radiate heat over a longer period of time. So it's considered a thermal battery. It stores a lot of heat and then it slowly releases it, which is what I want, because I really need this to last the night. It would really suck if this only heated the camper for half the night and then for the rest of the night it was freezing cold. As I've said before, when I first did this whole setup, I threw the copper coil directly on the fire, which drastically reduces its lifespan, and I don't think it's as efficient. So I'm really happy that I coiled it this time in a lobster pot, and I filled the pot full of sand, and so that protects the coil, and that'll keep it alive much, much, much longer, and I can keep using it without worrying about it cracking or springing leaks. That sand will do a great job of insulating the coil from getting too much heat, while at the same time heating it very well. And once that fire goes out, then that sand will retain that heat for quite a while after. And so this system will continue to circulate, I'm sure, for an hour or two, maybe an hour after the fire dies down. So I'll be very curious to see, once I stay out here one night to give this a test, I'm curious to see how long the system will continue to circulate, how long it will stay warm after the fire dies down. And of course, ideally, I want it to last the entire night. As for tonight, I won't be staying in the camper. Today was purely to test the system out and make sure it works well. And so next time, I'm hoping to actually go out with this whole system, give it a try, see how it works, and go from there. And of course, I can always make improvements. But today, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and no leaks, and it heats the place well, so can't get any better than that. As I've been talking in here, it's been getting warmer and warmer, so I'm going to crack the door here so I can cool off a little bit. But the temperature right now inside is 23 degrees Celsius, and outside it's -1 degree Celsius. And that translates to 73 degrees Fahrenheit inside and 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And so I'll show you here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's Celsius. So now I'm going to bleed the lines and put out the fire, pack up, and head home. If you're interested in what I'm doing here, I do plan to go on a trip with this camper soon, and using this ammo box heater to heat the camper for a night just to see how it works. And I plan to also try different forms of heat as well, just to see what works best in this small space. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to pack up and head home. Until next time, my friends.